Ladies, let me talk to you for a minute, because too many of you are confused by silence. Too many of you think quiet means gone. Too many of you think if a man ain't calling, texting, liking, watching, then somehow you didn't matter. Let me tell you something real tonight. Silence is not absence. Silence is not peace. Silence is not closure. Sometimes silence is a man losing control and trying not to show it. See, women process pain out loud. Men process pain in private. So when he goes quiet, when he disappears, when he acts like you don't exist, you think, oh, he moved on. No, ma'am. A lot of times he didn't move on. He moved inward. And what's happening inside that man's mind right now would shock you. Because the truth is, he's not silent because he's healed. He's silent because he's struggling. And tonight, I'm going to break down exactly what his silence really means, why you still live rent-free in his head, and how your quiet power flipped the whole game. Let's get into it. His silence is not peace, it's control. He's losing ladies. Let me slow this thing down and tell you the truth most people won't say out loud. When a man goes silent, everybody wants you to believe it means he's calm, healed, unbothered, or finally at peace. But that's not what silence usually is. Silence is not comfort. Silence is not clarity. Silence is often what happens when a man feels the ground shifting under his feet and he doesn't know how to stand on it anymore. See, men are taught to control situations, emotions, outcomes. From the time they're young, they're praised for being steady, dominant, unfazed. So when a woman changes her energy, when she stops reacting, when she stops chasing, when she stops needing reassurance, it shakes him. Not because he hates her, but because he no longer knows where he stands. And uncertainty is uncomfortable for a man who's used to being in charge. His silence is a pause to regroup, a pause to think, a pause to stop himself from doing something that would expose how much power he's already lost. Because the moment he reaches out, the moment he asks how you're doing, the moment he checks in, just to see, he risks revealing something he's trying to hide, that you still matter more than he expected. So he stays quiet, not because he's over you, but because he's fighting himself. There's a battle going on inside his head. One part of him wants to act normal, casual, unaffected. Another part of him wants to hear your voice, see your name pop up, feel that familiar connection again. Silence becomes the shield he hides behind. It's the last place where he feels like he still has some control left. And here's the part most women don't realize. When you used to call, text, explain, or react, you were giving him reassurance. You were unknowingly reminding him, I'm still here. I still care. You still have access. But when you stopped, that reassurance disappeared. And now he has to sit with the reality that access to you is no longer guaranteed. That loss of access is loud. Your silence didn't just remove noise from his life. It removed certainty. And certainty is what made him comfortable enough to be careless in the first place. Now that comfort is gone. Now he's wondering. Now he's replaying conversations. Now he's questioning decisions he once felt confident about. And that's why silence feels so heavy to him. Because in that quiet, he's forced to confront something men don't like facing: consequences. Not consequences screamed or argued or demanded, but consequences felt. Consequences that show up in the empty space where you used to be. Consequences that don't ask for attention, but demand reflection. He may tell himself he's being strong by staying silent. He may tell himself he's winning by not reaching out. But deep down, he knows this isn't strength, it's restraint. And restraint only exists when desire is still alive. If he truly didn't care, there would be no battle. He wouldn't need to hold himself back. He wouldn't need to prove anything to himself. Indifference doesn't require discipline. Silence does. And here's the shift that changed everything. Your calmness, your composure, your refusal to react. That's what made him lose control. Because control isn't about being loud, it's about predictability. And you became unpredictable the moment you stopped responding the way he expected. He doesn't know if you're hurt. He doesn't know if you're healed. He doesn't know if you've moved on or simply moved differently. And not knowing eats at him far more than knowing you're upset ever did. So don't mistake his quiet for peace. Peace looks relaxed. Peace looks free. Silence looks tense. Silence looks guarded. Silence looks like someone trying to hold a door closed that keeps pushing back from the other side. Your silence didn't end the connection. It exposed the imbalance. It showed him that the power he thought he had was borrowed, not owned. And once borrowed power is taken back, it leaves a vacuum that can't be filled with pride alone. Right now, whether he admits it or not, he's adjusting to a version of you that no longer needs his validation, adjusting to the fact that you can exist without him being centered in your world, adjusting to the loss of control he once mistook for security. And that adjustment, that discomfort, that internal tension, that's not peace. That's the sound of control slipping through his fingers. Silence is how he protects his ego, ladies. Let's talk about something most people dance around but rarely say straight. A man's ego is not built for emotional exposure. It's built for image, pride, and the illusion of control. So when things don't go the way he planned, when a woman doesn't respond how he expected, when the power dynamic shifts, his first instinct isn't honesty, it's protection. And silence becomes the armor he puts on to guard the one thing he fears losing most, his sense of superiority. When you stop reaching out, stop asking questions, stop demanding clarity, something inside him cracks, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. Because now there's no stage where he gets to look unfazed. There's no audience watching him play the role of the man who's got it all together. It's just him and his thoughts. And those thoughts are asking questions his ego doesn't want to answer. Ego doesn't like uncertainty. Ego doesn't like rejection. Ego definitely doesn't like being reminded that it misjudged someone, when you walked away calmly, when you didn't fight for attention, when you didn't chase closure. His ego took that personally. Not because you did something wrong, but because your self-control reflected his lack of emotional awareness. So he goes quiet because silence allows him to pretend he chose this distance. Silence lets him rewrite the story in his head. It tells him, I'm not reaching out because I don't care, instead of the truth, which is, I'm not reaching out because I'm afraid of what I might feel if I do. Silence becomes a way to avoid vulnerability without admitting fear. If he were to speak, he'd have to admit things he's not ready to face. He'd have to admit he misses you. He'd have to admit he underestimated your strength. He'd have to admit that losing you didn't go according to his plan. And ego hates confession. Ego wants to stay polished, untouched, intact. That's why his silence feels so calculated. Because it is. It's not peace, it's self-preservation. Deep down, he knows reaching out would shift the balance. He knows one text could expose how much you still affect him. And once that door opens, there's no guarantee it closes cleanly. He might get ignored. He might get a calm response that reminds him you've moved on. Or worse, he might realize you're no longer emotionally available to him at all. And that possibility terrifies the ego. Because ego survives on validation. It needs to believe it still has influence, even from a distance. So instead of risking rejection, he chooses silence. Silence lets him keep the fantasy that if he wanted you, he could still have you. Silence keeps his pride intact, even if it costs him peace of mind. What makes this harder for him is your composure. When you don't lash out, when you don't post emotional messages, when you don't send late night paragraphs, it robs his ego of proof that he mattered more than he should have. Your calm suggests something dangerous to his pride, that you didn't need him to survive. And nothing humbles an ego faster than realizing it wasn't essential. Your silence communicates something words never could. It says you value yourself enough not to beg for clarity. It says you trust your worth enough to walk away without drama. And to an ego that expected chaos, that expected tears, that expected pursuit, this feels like a loss disguised as dignity. He might convince himself that he's being mature, that he's being strong, that he's taking a high road. But strength doesn't avoid emotion. It faces it. Silence in this case is avoidance dressed up as discipline. Every day he stays quiet. He's choosing pride over relief. He's choosing the safety of ego over the risk of honesty, because honesty might require him to admit that he didn't handle things well, that he took you for granted, that he assumed you'd always be there. And ego hates being wrong. So instead of reaching out, he retreats. Instead of explaining, he withdraws. Instead of owning his feelings, he hides behind silence and calls it control. But make no mistake, control that depends on avoidance is fragile. It only lasts as long as no one challenges it. Your continued peace is that challenge. Because while he's protecting his ego, you're rebuilding your self-respect. And self-respect is louder than pride. It doesn't need to prove anything. It doesn't need validation. It simply exists. His silence may protect his ego for now, but it also traps him in unresolved emotions, traps him in questions he refuses to ask, traps him in a version of himself that's too proud to grow. And the truth is, ego can keep a man quiet for a long time, but it can't keep him free. Because the woman who walked away with her dignity intact doesn't haunt him because she spoke too much. She haunts him because she didn't. He's watching even when he's quiet. Ladies, let me clear up one of the biggest lies you've been telling yourselves. You think silence means blindness. You think because he's not calling, not texting, not reacting, not saying your name out loud, that somehow you disappeared from his world. But that's not how attachment works. Silence does not turn off awareness. Silence sharpens it. When a man goes quiet, he doesn't stop paying attention. He just stops making it obvious, because watching from a distance feels safer than engaging directly. It lets him stay informed without risking his pride. It lets him observe without exposing emotion. And that's exactly what he's doing right now. He's watching your energy, your movement, your shift, not obsessively in a dramatic way, but consistently in a controlled way. Enough to know whether you're still the same woman he left behind or someone he no longer recognizes. He notices the changes before you think he does. The way you post differently. The way you carry yourself differently. The absence of sadness where there used to be emotion. The quiet confidence that replaced explanations. Those details don't go unnoticed because men are far more observant when they feel something slipping out of reach. And here's the part that matters. He's watching because he still cares about the outcome. If he truly didn't care, he wouldn't check at all. He wouldn't wonder. He wouldn't feel the pull to see how you're doing. Indifference doesn't monitor. Indifference moves on without curiosity. Watching is a sign of unresolved attachment. He may not comment, he may not like, he may not respond. But that doesn't mean he's not present. It means he's choosing invisibility while staying informed. And that choice tells you everything you need to know about where he stands emotionally. Your silence forced him into this position. When you stopped providing updates, explanations, and emotional access, he had to find other ways to stay connected to the version of you he no longer controls, and watching became the compromise. Close enough to feel you, far enough to protect his ego. There's also something else happening beneath the surface. Every time he sees you doing well, it challenges the story he told himself. He expected you to be hurt longer. He expected your world to slow down. He expected your absence from his life to affect you more than it affected him. But instead, he sees resilience. And that resilience confuses him, because it forces him to question whether he underestimated you or overestimated his role in your life. That kind of realization doesn't come with peace. It comes with internal tension. So he watches, quietly, carefully. He's looking for signs that you still miss him, signs that you're struggling, signs that he still matters in the way he once did. Not because he wants to hurt you, but because his sense of significance is tied to your reaction. When those signs don't appear, it unsettles him. And here's what most women don't understand: the less you perform, the more he observes. When there's no drama to distract him, no emotional noise to interpret, he's left with only the facts, your stability, your progress, your peace. That's when watching turns into reflection. He starts comparing who you are now to who you were when he had full access, comparing how you show up for yourself now versus how you showed up for the relationship. And those comparisons don't always land in his favor. Watching from a distance also keeps hope alive. As long as he hasn't fully disengaged, a part of him believes there's still a connection. That belief doesn't mean he'll act on it immediately, but it does mean you're still mentally present, still relevant, still a reference point in his emotional landscape. Your silence didn't erase you. It highlighted you. It made your absence louder than your presence ever was. It forced him to notice you not because you demanded attention, but because you stopped asking for it. That shift is powerful because it turns the dynamic around. Now he's the one paying attention while you're living. And that's the truth most people don't want to admit. Silence doesn't end attachment. It changes its direction. It moves the focus from interaction to observation, from conversation to contemplation. So don't let the quiet fool you. He may not be reaching out. He may not be speaking your name. He may not be visible. But attention doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it watches. Sometimes it wonders. Sometimes it waits. And the woman who keeps moving forward without looking back becomes impossible to ignore, even from a distance. Your silence forces him to feel everything, ladies. Understand this clearly: when you stop talking, you didn't end the story. You removed the noise. And in that quiet, everything he had been avoiding finally caught up with him. Silence doesn't erase emotion. Silence removes distractions. And when distractions are gone, feelings don't disappear. They get louder. When you were explaining yourself, he didn't have to sit with his guilt. When you were arguing, he didn't have to reflect. When you were emotional, he could label you as too much and avoid accountability. But now there's nothing to hide behind. Your silence took away his escape routes. He can't blame your tone. He can't blame your reactions. He can't blame your questions. All that's left is him and what he did or didn't do. Men are not trained to process emotion in real time. They push it aside, they compartmentalize, they stay busy, they distract themselves with work, friends, routines, and habits. That works for a while. But silence has a way of breaking through the cracks. Because when there's no new information coming from you, his mind fills in the gaps with memory. He remembers moments he didn't value enough when they were happening. He remembers things you did quietly that he never acknowledged. He remembers how safe it felt to have someone who genuinely cared. And memory hits harder when it arrives uninvited. Your silence gave his mind room to replay the past without interruption. No new arguments to overwrite the old ones. No fresh conversations to numb the loss. Just space. And space is dangerous for someone who hasn't made peace with their choices. He starts to feel regret, not dramatic regret, but slow creeping regret. The kind that shows up late at night. The kind that lingers when he's alone. The kind that asks, what if I handled that differently? And doesn't offer an easy answer. And that's where the real impact happens. Because regret is not loud, it's heavy. Your silence forced him to sit in that weight, to feel the absence of your presence in moments where he expected you to still be there, to notice the emotional gap you used to fill without asking for credit. Before he could delay these feelings because you were still emotionally available. Even if things weren't perfect, your energy was present. And presence makes loss feel distant. But when presence disappears completely, reality sets in. Silence makes loss real. It also forces him to confront his own role in what ended. Without your voice in the conversation, there's no one else to assign blame to. No back and forth to soften responsibility. The truth becomes harder to avoid. Some things ended because he didn't show up the way he should have. And that realization stings. Not because he's a bad person, but because he didn't expect consequences to arrive this quietly. He expected anger, he expected confrontation. He expected tears. He didn't expect dignity. Your silence communicated something powerful without saying a word. It said, I don't need to explain myself to be at peace. And that message lingers. It echoes in moments when he tries to move on but finds his mind drifting back to you. Because unresolved emotions don't disappear. They wait. Every time something reminds him of you, a place, a song, a moment, those emotions resurface. And without you there to process them with him, he has to face them alone. That's unfamiliar territory for many men, and uncomfortable. He may try to rationalize. He may tell himself it was for the best. He may distract himself with new experiences. But the body remembers what the mind tries to suppress. And silence gives the body time to catch up. Your absence turned emotions into echoes. And echoes don't stop just because you ignore them. What makes this even stronger is that your silence wasn't cold. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't meant to punish. It was simply a boundary. And boundaries don't argue, they stand. That stand forced him to feel everything he postponed. He feels the loss. He feels the confusion. He feels the discomfort of not knowing where he stands with you. He feels the emotional debt he never paid while you were still there. And whether he ever admits it or not, those feelings change him. Silence doesn't shout. Silence doesn't accuse. Silence doesn't demand. Silence waits. And in that waiting, it lets the truth rise on its own. You didn't need to say a word to make him feel it. You didn't need closure. You didn't need the last conversation. Your silence did the work. Because when the noise stops, the heart finally speaks. He misses you but doesn't know how to return with pride, ladies. This is where it gets complicated, because missing someone is easy. Facing yourself is not. A man can miss you deeply and still remain silent, not because the feeling isn't real, but because he doesn't know how to come back without breaking the image he's built of himself. Pride doesn't stop emotion. Pride stops expression. He thinks about you more than he admits. In quiet moments in between distractions, when the noise of the day dies down, your presence shows up, not as a fantasy, but as a reminder of what felt familiar, of what felt steady, of what felt like home before he realized he could lose it. But here's the problem. Returning means acknowledging that leaving, emotionally or physically, cost him something. And pride does not like paying that price. To reach out, he would have to choose humility over image. He would have to admit that he didn't handle things well, that he made assumptions, that he thought you would stay regardless of effort. And for a man who values appearing composed, unaffected, in control, that kind of honesty feels like defeat. So he hesitates. He replays the moment he could have done better. He rewrites conversations in his head. He imagines what he would say if he reached out, and then stops himself, because he doesn't just fear rejection. He fears exposure. What if you respond calmly instead of emotionally? What if you've healed enough not to need him? What if he realizes he no longer has the same place in your life? Those possibilities threaten his pride more than your absence ever could. He wants to return as the man who still has authority, not as the man who has to ask for a second chance. And that internal conflict keeps him frozen. Missing you pulls him forward. Pride pulls him back. And silence becomes the space where those two forces collide. There's also something else pride protects him from: guilt. Guilt for not showing up when you needed consistency. Guilt for taking your presence for granted. Guilt for assuming you'd always be available. Returning would mean facing the emotional debt he avoided paying while you were still there. So instead of reaching out honestly, he convinces himself to wait. He tells himself it's not the right time, that you need space, that maybe you're better off. All rationalizations designed to protect his ego from discomfort. But waiting doesn't erase longing. The longer he stays silent, the heavier the absence becomes. Because now he's not just missing you, he's missing the version of himself that felt secure when you were around. And that's a difficult thing to admit, that someone else's presence grounded him more than he realized. He wonders if reaching out would disrupt your peace. He wonders if he'd be welcome. He wonders if he missed his window. And that uncertainty feeds his pride, not by strengthening it, but by making him cautious. Pride doesn't rush. Pride delays. Your growth makes his return even harder because you're no longer standing in the same emotional place you were before. You didn't wait. You didn't collapse. You didn't beg for clarity. You kept moving, and movement changes the dynamic. Now, if he comes back, he's not stepping into familiarity. He's stepping into a new version of you. And approaching a woman who knows her worth requires a different level of maturity. He's aware of that. And it scares him because returning with pride would mean returning as someone evolved, not just someone nostalgic. It would mean showing up with accountability, not excuses, with intention, not convenience. And until he feels capable of that, silence feels safer. But missing you doesn't stop. It lingers. It shows up when he least expects it. It softens moments he thought were firm. It humbles thoughts he thought were confident. And here's the truth that matters most. Whether he returns or not is no longer the point. Because his struggle to return with pride is proof of the impact you had. You weren't forgettable. You weren't replaceable. You weren't insignificant. You became the standard he now measures himself against. Silence may keep him away, but it doesn't erase what he feels. It only delays the moment he has to confront whether his pride matters more than his happiness. And while he wrestles with that decision, you continue forward, grounded, self-respecting, and no longer waiting for someone else to choose you. Because the woman who leaves quietly teaches a man the loudest lesson of all: some doors don't close with anger. They close with growth. Your power is not in waiting, it's in moving forward. Ladies, this is where the truth hits hard. Your power isn't in watching your phone, waiting for a text, or counting the hours until he decides to reach out. Your power isn't in hoping he finally sees what he lost or bending your energy to make him react. Your power lives in moving forward, in reclaiming your life, your peace, your joy, and your confidence without needing his validation to fuel it. Waiting might feel like strategy, but waiting is passive. Waiting keeps you in the shadows of his decisions. Waiting ties your happiness to his availability. Waiting leaves your emotions vulnerable to his silence, his ego, his pride. And let me be honest, ladies, waiting rarely works. Men don't always recognize absence immediately. They don't always act when you hope they will. Waiting can make you small, exactly the opposite of the energy that demands respect. Moving forward is different. Moving forward is active. Moving forward means you are in control of your own narrative. You choose your mornings, your nights, your activities, your friends, your growth. You stop giving them the power to dictate how you feel every day. And that, ladies, is magnetic. That, ladies, is influence without effort. You don't have to text, explain, or chase. You simply live, and in living fully, you force him to reckon with what he lost. Think about this for a second. Every step you take forward in your career, in your health, in your friendships, in your emotional growth, every step is a silent message. It says, I exist outside of you. I thrive without you. I am not waiting for approval or attention from someone who didn't prioritize me. And when a man sees that, even quietly, even from a distance, it stirs something in him. It makes him pay attention without you saying a single word. That's the subtle, undeniable power of moving forward. Moving forward also protects you from emotional stagnation. Waiting traps your heart in a loop of what ifs, and maybe your mind becomes a battlefield of doubt and longing, constantly replaying past conversations, analyzing every action. Moving forward cuts through that loop. It frees you to think clearly, to make decisions that benefit your life, not someone else's indecision. It teaches you that your happiness is your responsibility, not his. And that lesson is invaluable. And here's something else most women don't realize: moving forward is the ultimate act of respect for yourself. When you leave quietly, when you step away from drama, when you reclaim your peace, you show him and the world that your value isn't negotiable. You demonstrate that you are whole, complete, and undeterred by someone else's inability to act. Waiting never communicates that. Waiting communicates neediness.